You're on ABC's Sunshine Coast, and there are concerns being raised this morning that access to the National Disability Insurance Scheme could be restricted to tens of thousands of people with psychosocial disabilities under changes mooted in a review of the scheme last year. And if you're wondering what a psychosocial disability is, it's essentially a disability caused by mental health issues, as distinct from a specific mental illness. You may have heard Kristen Gillespie on AM earlier describing what her experience of having a psychosocial disability is. River Knight is a disability advocate from Developing Australian Communities. Good morning.
Good morning.
Why would people with this disability be worried that they will lose access to the NDIS?
Well, we've had the age-old debate between mental health and disability for a very long time. And before, of course, NDIS rolled out, we were just starting to get a little bit better at it and understand how we need to do that. Because traditionally, even here in Queensland, if you had a mental illness, disability service would say, that's not disability, that's mental health. Go to the Department of Health. They'll pay for your services. And then, of course, Department of Health would say, no, you've got a disability. Go back to DSQ and ask them for supports. And in the meantime, the person sits in the middle, doesn't get the supports, and then we end up with someone in crisis, and they end up with hundreds of thousands of dollars in a package on NDIS, as opposed to community services, which is the foundational services that you hear Mr. Shorten talking about a lot right now. So we have this argy-bargy rearing its head, and in the middle are people who really don't care who funds those services. And it's going to cost us a lot more if we don't get it right and get those foundation services in place now, before we start talking about cutting people from schemes that are unfortunately the only option for many.
And this isn't the only area where there are concerns about people losing access to NDIS. What are some other disabilities where there are fears that people could get shut out of the scheme specifically?
Regional Australia is a really big concern right now, because the decisions to how we fund and support a person in the middle of a city surrounded by service options is very different to the decisions that need to be made for someone who's in a regional area that has very limited services and resources. So as soon as we start by doing blanket yes and no's, we start having those issues where a person's individual experience and where they live becomes a huge point of discrimination and a huge difficulty in terms of accessing supports. They have a right to access.
And you, River Knight, and others have been ringing alarm bells about this issue for months now. Is there any sign that you're being listened to?
Well, unfortunately, even though co-design's a big thing at the moment, we're seeing a lot of it still done behind doors, and then we're waiting for announcements about things, as opposed to saying, you know what, this is what we're proposing to do. Let's share that around. Let's get everyone's feedback to see if we're really hitting the mark. So we're a little bit concerned because we kind of don't get to see what's being developed until they're at the point of going, well, I'm going to table this in Parliament. And it's like, well, hang on, can you let us have a look first? So we're kind of we're still frustrated because the things that are being used to justify extreme changes are money. And the things that we keep raising are the fact that, we're doing things in the most expensive way. And can we get back to basics with those foundational supports so people don't need $200,000-$400,000 a year, because we supported them 2 years prior before they got to a crisis. So we didn't have to wait until they were in a crisis, and then it costs them 10 times more.
Now, last year's review came after the current Labor federal government and the previous Liberal National coalition raised repeated concerns about the cost of the NDIS blowing out. Do those concerns stack up?
Can't really argue with the fact that we have a community that needs those supports. So it's really about the bucket of funds. So whether it comes out of the NDIS bucket, or whether it comes out of the state bucket, or if it comes out of the Department of Health bucket or the disability bucket, that's really the argument of who's going to pay for it. So at the moment, we're kind of looking at it and going, yeah, but we're doing the most expensive version. So I guess that the hard part is around trying to get the community to understand so that this doesn't become a political issue. So when we have the next election, we know that people are going to say, oh, cost blowouts. And we're going to see political parties saying, well, we're going to rein in those costs. And we're not actually asking people to not spend or to spend more. What we're asking the government to do is to do things in a way that's smart.
River Knight, thank you for helping us unpack that today. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much.